You've heard the words Odinani and Omenani, maybe in a proverb, maybe in a family ritual, or maybe whispered by elders who no longer explain what they truly mean. But what if I told you they are not the same? What if I told you that confusing them has cost us more than we know? One is spiritual law, older than the earth itself. The other is the culture we built around it. One is divine, the other human. One is the root, the other the fruit. In today's world, where the line between truth and tradition is blurred, many people are living by Omenani without ever knowing Odinani. They honor the rituals but forget the reason. They carry the customs but have lost the compass. This is not just history. This is your inheritance, your spiritual DNA. The laws written not on paper but in the land, in the sky, and in your chi. So ask yourself, do you know the difference? And if you don't, are you ready to remember? Welcome to Africosmos 1. Let's begin the journey. Odinani. The word itself is an invocation, a portal to the ancient foundations of Igbo thought and spiritual order. It comes from the phrase Odinani, meaning it is in the land, or that which is fixed in the land. This is not metaphor. It is a direct affirmation of something enduring, something elemental, something woven into the very soil and soul of the Igbo world. To understand Odinani is to understand the original laws that governed not just people, but nature, morality, and the cosmos. It is not merely belief, it is alignment with divine structure. If Omenani is the outward dance, Odinani is the rhythm behind the drumbeat. It does not shift with time, nor bend to convenience. It simply is. At the center of Odinani lies Chukwu, also called Chi-Ukwu, the supreme creator. Chukwu is not a deity confined to one shrine or village, but the omnipresent force from which all existence flows. Unlike in monotheistic frameworks where the divine is often portrayed as distant and ruling from above, Chukwu is both beyond and within. The presence of Chukwu is known not through image or idol, but through the order and interconnection of all things. Trees grow because Chukwu wills life. Rain falls because Chukwu balances the heavens and the earth. The sun rises, not just because it must, but because it is part of an eternal script authored by Chukwu. This isn't superstition, it's cosmology, an understanding that life is not random, but purposeful. From Chukwu comes the Chi, the individual spirit assigned to every human being. Your Chi is your divine fingerprint, your personal guide through life. It is your connection to the higher order. It is neither angel nor ancestor, but a spiritual twin, accountable, watchful, and utterly unique to you. Your destiny is tied to your Chi. When people say follow your Chi, they are saying follow the divine map etched into your soul before you were born. It is this Chi that travels with you from one lifetime to the next. For in Odinani, life does not end with death. Reincarnation, or Ilo Uwa, is central. The soul returns, not arbitrarily but with purpose, to complete, to grow, to heal unfinished legacies. A child born may be the return of a grandmother or an uncle. And this is not myth, it is lived knowledge. Families know. Elders see the signs. If Chai is the individual guide, then Allah is the collective conscience. Allah, the earth goddess, is not only the mother of the land, but the enforcer of moral law. She is justice, fertility, and the final authority on right and wrong. Taboos are not just cultural, they are spiritual violations against Allah. Spill blood unjustly on her soil, and it is not just murder, it is desecration. Dishonor the dead, and you dishonor Allah. She holds the ledger of the community's soul. And because Allah is everywhere, every hill, every stream, every grove, moral behavior is not confined to the temple, but expected in daily life. There is no escaping her gaze because she is the land itself. This land is not random either. It breathes through the 4 sacred market days, Eke, Ori, Afo, and Minkwo. These days are not just economic intervals, they are cosmic cycles. Each market day carries its own spiritual essence, and people are born under the influence of one of these rhythms. A child born on Eke may be analytical, while one born on Nekwo may be a healer. Marriages are consulted according to these days. Conflicts are judged based on them. Even traditional healers align their rituals with the energies of the market days. This is a timekeeping system that does not just mark days, it reveals the spiritual character of time itself. The week is not an artificial grid, it is a heartbeat, echoing the larger rhythm of the universe. Destiny in Odinani is not fate in the sense of helpless surrender. It is called Akala, Aka, what is written by the hand. This means your life has a path, yes, but also that your choices matter. You may be born with a spiritual calling, but you must still live it with discipline and intention. You may have reincarnated with gifts, but they require cultivation. The hand may have written your destiny, but your feet must still walk the path. In this way, Odinani invites responsibility, not resignation. You are not just a product of environment, you are a participant in a divine agreement. So what then is Odinani? It is the divine constitution. It is the unchanging framework from which all Igbo life, belief, and values flow. It is not something elders created, it is something they inherited. It is not debated, it is remembered. Unlike Omenani, which can shift to meet the needs of the times, Odinani remains fixed, like the roots of a centuries-old Iroko tree. You can trim the branches, you can rearrange the leaves, but the roots stay where they are. To speak of Odinani, then, is to speak of something beyond opinion. It is not just about what the ancestors did, but about why they did it, and who whispered those instructions to them in the first place. It is about a sacred order that predates colonization, predates churches, predates even kingdoms. It is the oldest story in the Igbo soul, and once you truly hear it, you don't just understand your culture, you begin to understand yourself. Omenani is the living heartbeat of the Igbo community. If Odinani is the divine blueprint fixed in the land, Omenani is what we do upon that land, the manifestation of the spiritual in the realm of the social. The name itself, Omenani, translates as what is done on the land, a reflection of its rootedness in community life, tradition, and the evolving cultural fabric of the people. It is the collective memory in motion, a set of practices, customs, and moral codes that regulate how a society behaves. Where Odinani defines the eternal principles, Omenani shows how those principles are acted upon. It is the bridge between the sacred and the social. And unlike Odinani, it adapts, it grows, it learns, it reacts to history, context, and generational shifts. At its core, Omenani includes the laws that govern community behavior, laws that are more than rules, they are reflections of the values embedded in the spiritual soil. These laws take the form of taboos, prohibitions, and expectations. For instance, it may be taboo to whistle at night in some communities, not because of superstition alone, but because it is believed to summon spirits or confuse ancestral energies. Children are taught not just manners but morals. It's not just wrong to steal, it is an affront to both the community and to Allah, the earth goddess. In Omenani, wrongdoings are communal injuries, and the consequences ripple outward. Then come the rites, the rituals that mark the significant transitions of life. Marriage is not merely a personal union, but a community contract. The traditional Igbo marriage ceremony, complete with kola nut presentations, dowry negotiations, and ancestral blessings, is a public declaration that a union is spiritually and socially sanctioned. Burial rites are equally elaborate, ensuring the dead are honored correctly, their spirits appeased, and their journey into the ancestral realm made smooth. Title-taking ceremonies, such as the Ozo title, mark the passage into eldership and moral authority. These rites reinforce identity, belonging, and responsibility, weaving the personal journey into the collective narrative. Festivals, too, are key elements, joyous, sacred, and structured. The New Yam Festival, Iri Ji, for instance, is not just about food. It is about gratitude to the land, remembrance of ancestors, and community renewal. Each dance, drumbeat, and masquerade performance encodes meaning that goes far beyond entertainment. Justice, in Omenani, is not a matter of codes and courthouses, but of cosmic and communal balance. The traditional justice system recognizes that wrongdoing affects not just individuals, but the harmony of the community and the ancestors. Disputes are often settled by elders' councils, where wisdom, lineage, and reputation carry weight. The Ofo stick, a sacred staff symbolizing truth and authority, is used by leaders and spiritual intermediaries to declare verdicts and invoke divine witness. In serious cases, people may swear before Amadioha, the god of thunder and justice, invoking his wrath should they lie. Justice is not abstract. It is immediate, sacred, and rooted in restoring equilibrium. The age grade system is another vital structure within Omenani. From youth, Igbo individuals are placed into age grades, which function as both social categories and working groups. Each age grade has defined responsibilities, cleaning village roads, organizing festivals, enforcing certain norms, even preparing for defense in times of conflict. It is through this system that individuals are taught discipline, unity, and community service. You grow with your peers, and as you mature, so does your role. The age grade system ensures that leadership is nurtured gradually, with experience and service shaping each person's rise and influence. All of these elements, laws, rights, justice, age roles, are dynamic. They evolve based on the needs of the people, the pressures of history, and the insights of elders and spiritual leaders. That is the strength of Omenani. It does not remain frozen in the past. It bends without breaking. It welcomes new expressions while still anchoring itself to ancestral wisdom. That is why it is said, Omenani is the cultural expression of Odinani. Just as language changes, while the truths it conveys remain, Omenani adjusts itself while still pointing to the fixed principles of Odinani. Through Omenani, the divine becomes communal. The sacred becomes tangible. We see this in how celebrations are held, how crimes are judged, how children are named, how ancestors are remembered. Omenani reminds the Igbo that spirituality is not confined to the shrine. It lives in the village square, in the family compound, in the hands of elders, and the feet of masquerades. It teaches that to be spiritual is also to be responsible, respectful, and rooted. Yet it must also be said, Omenani can change, and it must to survive. As diasporic identities form and urbanization spreads, new forms of Omenani arise. Online festivals, blended marriage customs, diaspora councils adapting tradition for new lands. This doesn't dilute the tradition, it keeps it alive, it breathes it forward. Omenani, then, is not just what was. It is also what is becoming. It is the ritualized memory of a people walking their truth in ever-changing times. It is how the sacred walks in sandals. It is the body that houses the soul of Odinani. And when properly understood, Omenani is not simply culture. It is culture with a conscience, heritage with a heartbeat. At the heart of Igbo spirituality lies a crucial distinction that is often blurred, but must be made clear if one is to truly understand the foundation and function of its belief system. The difference between Odinani and Omenani. Though they often walk together and sometimes even speak with the same breath, they are not the same. One is divine, the other is cultural. One is fixed like the stars, the other flows like the river. Odinani is the spiritual law, the metaphysical order authored by the supreme being Chukwu. It is constant, universal, and unaffected by time or geography. Omenani, on the other hand, is the human response to that divine order. It is how communities interpret, practice, and live out Odinani in their daily lives. Omenani bends to fit the context of the people, the era, and the landscape. Odinani does not. To grasp this, think of Odinani as a blueprint drawn by divine hands, a map of the soul, unchanging and eternal. Now imagine Omenani as the path a traveler takes across that map. The path may twist or detour depending on the terrain, but the map remains the same. That's the essence of the difference. One is divine design, the other is cultural adaptation. The danger comes when the path becomes so worn, so ritualized, that people forget to check whether it still aligns with the original map. That's when tradition becomes performance, and performance forgets purpose. Take Ala, the earth goddess, as an example. Odinani reveres her as the spiritual embodiment of justice, morality, and fertility. She is more than myth. She is the conscience of the land. Under Odinani, she is sacred, untouchable, and omnipresent judge. In Omenani, that reverence takes form through community taboos. For example, defecating or spilling blood on sacred ground is strictly forbidden. Not simply for sanitary or aesthetic reasons, but because it is a violation of Allah herself. The divine law, respect the land, is fixed. The cultural expression, how to avoid polluting it, may vary from village to village, but the root remains the same. Another clear distinction appears in the concept of reincarnation. Odinani teaches that the soul returns, cycling through lifetimes with a purpose, to grow, to teach, to complete unfinished spiritual work. This belief is woven into the cosmology itself. In response, Omenani manifests this belief through naming ceremonies. A child who displays certain signs, perhaps birthmarks resembling those of a late relative or uncanny personality traits, is recognized as a returnee. They may be named after the ancestor they are believed to be. The practice evolves, the belief does not. Some communities may consult diviners to confirm such reincarnations, others may rely on elder intuition. But whether it's affirmed through ritual or recognition, the expression changes, while the truth it points to stands unshaken. It is this dynamic, this balance between the eternal and the flexible, that defines the relationship between Odinani and Omenani. When the balance is maintained, a community walks in harmony. But when Omenani is mistaken for Odinani, problems arise. Cultural practices, which are meant to evolve, become rigid and dogmatic. People may hold on to a custom because that's how it's always been done, forgetting to ask whether the custom still reflects the original divine principle. On the flip side, when people discard Omenani without understanding Odinani, they risk severing themselves from a spiritual foundation. They abandon not just practices, but the very principles those practices are meant to uphold. Visually, imagine a split screen. On one side, you see a woman kneeling before a sacred tree, offering prayers to Allah, a direct spiritual act rooted in Odinani. On the other side, you see a community gathering to enforce a taboo against cutting down that very tree, a social law derived from the reverence of the divine. In another frame, you see a newborn being introduced to the family's ancestors in a quiet, solemn rite. This is the spiritual belief in reincarnation. The next frame shows the same child being given the name of a great-grandparent and celebrated with food, dance, and laughter. That is Omenani in motion. Together, they show not contradiction, but complementarity. The divine principle breathes life into the cultural form. Understanding the core difference is not about intellectual clarity alone. It is about spiritual survival. In a world where tradition is often dismissed as outdated, and modernity demands constant reinvention, knowing what must remain sacred and what can be reshaped is crucial. Odinani anchors the soul. Omenani dresses it for the journey. One gives you direction, the other gives you movement. Without Odinani, Omenani becomes hollow. Without Omenani, Odinani becomes distant. So let this be clear. Odinani is not your grandfather's habit. It is your soul's contract. Omenani is not your grandmother's dance. It is how your generation chooses to move in rhythm with the divine. When you confuse the two, you lose both the message and the method. But when you honor their difference and harmony, you live with both power and peace. And in a time when many are lost in the noise of borrowed beliefs and diluted identities, that clarity is more vital than ever. The confusion between Odinani and Omenani did not begin in the villages, and it certainly did not originate with the ancestors. It began with the arrival of foreign systems of belief, governance, and control, each determined not only to dominate the land, but to reshape the soul of its people. When colonialism swept through Igboland, it did more than redraw borders and build railroads. It invaded the spiritual terrain, carrying with it missionaries, judges, and administrators who looked upon the traditions of the Igbo not with curiosity or respect, but with a condescending urge to civilize. To them, everything spiritual that did not resemble their own worldview was lumped together as paganism. Whether it was a divine truth rooted in Odinani or a cultural expression in Omenani, it was all branded the same: heathen, primitive, backward. In that sweeping condemnation, the lines that had long been clear within Igbo cosmology became muddied, misrepresented, and often violently erased. Missionaries, armed with Bibles and fervor, entered villages and labeled shrines as altars of demons, masquerades as devilish dances, and ancestral veneration as idolatry. They did not ask what Odinani meant, nor did they try to understand how Omenani functioned. Instead, they dismantled both, often without realizing there was a difference to begin with. The Chi, that deeply personal spiritual guide assigned to every individual, was dismissed as mere superstition. In its place, they offered the concept of guardian angels, spiritual companions, yes, but stripped of the ancestral continuity and moral accountability that Chi represents in the Igbo worldview. Likewise, the earth goddess Allah, who serves as both nurturer and moral judge, was replaced symbolically with the Virgin Mary or Jesus Christ, figures revered not from within the cultural logic of the land, but imposed from without. Colonial courts followed closely behind, dismantling the justice systems that Omenani had long upheld. The elders' councils, once the backbone of dispute resolution, were replaced with British-style magistrates who understood neither the context nor the consequences of the rulings they made. The sacred ofo stick, symbol of truth and justice, was replaced with written documents and foreign laws. Trial by oath, invocation of Amadioha, and community arbitration were deemed illegal, irrational, and uncivilized. In their place came systems that privileged written over oral, foreign over indigenous, and state power over ancestral authority. What resulted was not just the loss of a few customs or the silence of a few shrines. It was a spiritual fragmentation. People no longer knew where their traditions ended and their divine order began. The erosion was subtle but profound. Children grew up hearing their elders whisper prayers to Chi, while being taught in mission schools that such prayers were devilish. They watched masquerades dance during festivals, but were warned by priests that these figures were evil spirits. The dissonance created a generational wound, a rupture between identity and belief. And because Omenani had always been the carrier of Odinani, when it was dismissed as superstition, the divine principles it contained began to fade too. Perhaps the most tragic effect of this confusion is the internalization of inferiority. When a people are told for long enough that their practices are evil and their worldview is wrong, they begin to believe it. They start to abandon not just what they do, but who they are. Names change, languages die, and the sacred becomes a source of shame. In such an environment, it becomes nearly impossible to distinguish between what is divine and what is simply traditional. The dance becomes suspect, the proverb becomes outdated, the shrine becomes an embarrassment. All of it is cast under the same dark cloud. And yet the wisdom of the elders persists, often hidden in proverbs and warnings passed down with deliberate patience. One such voice, aged by experience and rooted in clarity, put it plainly: when you throw away Omenani without knowing Odinani, you become a stranger to your own bloodline. This is not just poetic lament, it is an urgent truth. Without knowing Odinani, the divine framework, you have no compass. And when you discard Omenani, the vessel through which that compass is expressed, you abandon the path as well. You walk in foreign shoes on unfamiliar soil, wondering why your feet ache and your heart feels lost. This historical distortion was no accident. It was a strategy of control. When you sever people from their roots, they are easier to govern. When you replace their gods with your saints, their shrines with your churches, their councils with your courts, you do not just conquer them, you recreate them in your image. And the result is not just political or economic domination, but spiritual disorientation. The people forget, not just their customs, but their cosmology. Not just their rights, but their reasons. To heal this wound requires more than nostalgia. It requires clarity, a return to the source. A deliberate effort to unlearn the confusion planted by colonialism and religion, and to remember what was always known, that Odinani is divine law, and Omenani is its living expression. One must never replace the other, and both must never be discarded. Only in their harmony can a people find their way back, not just to tradition, but to truth. In today's fast-paced globalized world, the difference between Odinani and Omenani isn't just a philosophical detail. It's a lifeline. For many young Igbo people, the word tradition has become loaded with suspicion, shame, or disinterest. They hear tales of rituals without meaning, of rules without relevance, of customs that feel more like burdens than blessings. So they turn away. In search of freedom or modernity, they abandon practices their grandparents held sacred. But here's the danger. In rejecting what they see as old-fashioned tradition, Omenani, they unknowingly turn their backs on something far deeper. Odinani, the divine essence of who they are. And in doing so, they don't just lose culture. They lose themselves. When tradition becomes confused with dogma and cultural practice is mistaken for spiritual truth, the youth are left with no foundation to stand on. They know what they don't want, to be trapped in rituals they don't understand. But they're not always shown what they truly need. A spiritual compass that transcends customs and connects them to something eternal. This is why the distinction between Odinani and Omenani matters now more than ever. When we understand that Odinani is not just a collection of rituals, but the soul of Igbo spirituality, we begin to reclaim clarity, confidence, and identity. And when we see Omenani as the body, changeable, adaptive, responsive, we free ourselves to engage with culture in a way that's honest, meaningful, and empowering. This rediscovery is already happening, though often quietly and organically. Across the continent and throughout the diaspora, movements like Afro-spirituality, African traditional religion revivalism, and pan-Africanist thought are calling young people back, not to old habits, but to ancestral wisdom. They are asking new questions with old roots. Who are we without colonial definitions? What did our ancestors know that we've forgotten? What was stolen from us in the name of salvation, progress, or civilization? Many are finding not just resistance to Western norms, but resonance with indigenous truths. They are lighting candles, offering libations, reading about their chi, and restoring altars not just in villages, but in apartments in Lagos, London, and Atlanta. They are realizing that spirituality isn't something imported, it was always ours. Understanding Odinani gives this movement spiritual depth. It grounds activism in metaphysics and cultural pride in divine purpose. It says, you are not lost, you are returning. And the more you understand that your soul has always had a blueprint, the less likely you are to settle for a borrowed identity. This clarity helps separate what must be preserved from what can be transformed. You don't have to marry exactly the way your ancestors did, but you must honor the values of unity, respect, and continuity that those marriage rites once carried. You don't have to farm the land, but you must respect Allah, the earth, as a living force. You don't have to dance the same way at every festival, but you must remember that celebration itself is sacred. The analogy becomes clear. Odinani is the soul. Omenani is the body. You can dress differently, speak differently, and even express faith differently. But your soul must remain true. If the soul forgets who it is, no amount of external beauty or cultural performance can compensate. And yet, if the soul remains strong, the body can move freely, experimenting, evolving, and thriving across generations. The danger lies in mistaking the body for the soul, or in discarding the body altogether, thinking it has no use. This is what many face today, a generation raised on globalization, taught to admire what is foreign and to doubt what is indigenous. They scroll through apps and algorithms seeking affirmation from systems that were never designed for them. And in the process, many are spiritually exhausted. But imagine if they knew that they come from a lineage that understood destiny, reincarnation, moral law, and cosmic balance long before these ideas had Western names. Imagine if they were taught not just history, but cosmology, not just cultural pride, but spiritual responsibility. That's what the restoration of Odinani offers. In a world of shifting norms and uncertain futures, Odinani is a constant. It is the map etched in the soul of every Igbo person, whether they live in Enugu or Edmonton. Omenani is how we interpret that map, how we walk the path, stumble, rise, and adjust our steps. But we must never throw away the map because the road feels unfamiliar. We must never abandon the soul because the body has changed. This moment in history demands that we look inward, not just for nostalgia, but for navigation. The revival of indigenous spirituality is not a trend. It is a healing. It is a remembering. And for that healing to take root, we must understand what we are healing toward. A divine order that has always been with us, waiting to be honored again. When we grasp the difference between Odinani and Omenani, we do not just reclaim tradition, we reclaim truth. And with that truth, we begin to build lives, communities, and futures that are not only rooted in spirit, but inspired by it. In the present day, Igbo spirituality is not a relic of the past. It is alive, breathing, and evolving in powerful ways. Although colonialism and religious suppression sought to erase or distort it, the essence of the spiritual framework remains remarkably resilient. Both Odinani and Omenani continue to find expression in the lives of those who are willing to look beneath the surface, to listen beyond the noise, and to reconnect with the sacred rhythms that have always pulsed through Igbo consciousness. These expressions may no longer always appear in the same village forms or ceremonial attire, but they are unmistakably present, adapting to the times while preserving their soul. Odinani today manifests in both quiet and profound ways. Many Igbo people still engage in personal prayers to their chi, invocations made not to a distant deity, but to their own spiritual twin, their divine inner compass. These prayers are not memorized from books, they are spoken with intention, offered from the heart, and grounded in specific life circumstances. Before embarking on a journey, Before making a major decision, or upon waking each morning, one might speak to their chi in a dialogue of accountability and alignment. Alongside these prayers, offerings continue to be made, not as bribes to a god, but as expressions of gratitude and requests for guidance. Palm wine, kola nuts, and food items are offered at family altars, small shrines, or beneath sacred trees. These acts, though simple, are deeply charged with spiritual energy and ancestral memory. Divination, too, is a continuing pillar of Odinani. The practice of Afa, a traditional Igbo form of divination, is still alive and being rediscovered by a new generation. Through Afa, individuals seek insight from the spiritual world about personal challenges, family matters, or communal decisions. The process involves a trained diviner interpreting symbols and messages received through sacred instruments and spiritual channels. For many, this is not superstition, it is spiritual consultation, a sacred form of communication with the divine realm and the ancestors. Meanwhile, Omenani continues to function in the everyday lives of Igbo people, often in ways so integrated that they go unnoticed. The Iri Ji, or New Yam Festival, is still widely celebrated across Igboland. Though modern festivals now often include DJs, stages, and social media coverage, the core purpose remains: thanksgiving to Allah for the harvest and the continuity of life. Weddings, too, retain many traditional elements: presentation of dowry, prostration before elders, prayers to the ancestors, and symbolic gestures that reflect the union of two families, not just two individuals. Family structures still operate within traditional roles. First sons bear responsibilities, daughters are guided by community expectations, and decisions are often made with extended family in mind. In these ways, Omenani weaves itself through the fabric of daily life, maintaining cohesion and identity. What's especially remarkable today is the way youth are reclaiming these spiritual practices, not as passive recipients, but as active seekers. Across Nigeria and the diaspora, young Igbo people are diving into books, oral histories, and community dialogues to reconnect with what was once suppressed. They are learning Afa, not just from books, but from elders and practitioners who carry the living tradition. They are choosing names for their children that reflect spiritual truths. Names like Chidubem, God is my guide, Ubachukwu, God's glory, and Ifani Chukwu, nothing is impossible for God. Names that are more than identity, but declarations of spiritual alignment. Shrine reconstruction is also becoming more common. In ancestral homes and newly built compounds, young men and women are rebuilding spaces for prayer, reflection, and communion with the unseen. These are not acts of rebellion against religion, but acts of remembrance, attempts to repair the broken bridge between generations and to once again hear the voice of their chi clearly. In the diaspora, where physical land may be far away, many are recreating sacred space in symbolic ways, creating altars, meditating on Igbo cosmology, celebrating cultural rituals in new contexts. Globally, there is a rising movement of spiritual reformation among Africans and people of African descent. Social media, podcasts, books, and virtual gatherings have created a space where Igbo spirituality is not only being discussed but revered. Elders are speaking, scholars are writing, creators are teaching, and across continents, the soul of a people is reawakening. In cities like London, New York, Accra, and Johannesburg, events are being held to honor ancestral knowledge. Young people who once felt disconnected are realizing that spirituality is not locked in a past century, it is within them, waiting to be rediscovered. This revival is not uniform. It is not always formal. It is often messy, complicated, and personal. But it is happening. The essence of Odinani and Omenani is finding new life in modern times, not because it has been institutionalized, but because it still speaks. It speaks to a yearning for meaning, for identity, for rootedness. It answers questions that science and politics cannot. It reminds a people that before they were told who to be, they already were. And through this remembering, a quiet revolution is unfolding, a return not just to tradition, but to spiritual truth. In this era of spiritual hunger, Igbo spirituality offers not just history, but healing. Not just practice, but power. Odinani is the map of your soul. Omenani is how you walk that map on the earth. This is the truth we return to again and again. Not because it is trendy, but because it is timeless. What you carry in your spirit, your chi, is not a relic of the past. It is your compass in the present, And how you honor that compass through culture, through practice, through community, is what gives your life rhythm, purpose, and depth. If you walk without a map, you get lost. If you carry a map but never walk, you remain stagnant. But when you carry both, Odinani and Omenani, you live aligned, grounded, and whole. In this journey, we've seen how the sacred and the social were never meant to compete but to cooperate. We've uncovered how colonialism, religion, and modernity conspired, intentionally or not, to blur a distinction that once gave our people clarity. And we've explored how that confusion led to spiritual forgetfulness, generational drift, and cultural disconnection. But we've also seen the awakening, the remembering, the powerful return of young people to ancient truths, and the creative ways they are reshaping what was broken without severing its roots. This is what we must hold on to. The spirit is greater than the ritual. You can change the way you dance, but not the reason you dance. You can update the ceremony, but never abandon the essence. The soul of a people is not found in repetition. It is found in remembrance. And remembrance demands more than imitation. It calls for intention, inquiry, and inner truth. So let these words settle deep. May the chi of your lineage guide your path. May Allah bless your footsteps, and may you never forget who you truly are. You are not a mistake. You are not a random product of time and space. You are part of a divine order that predates every colonizer, every system, every lie that ever tried to make you doubt your sacred worth. Now I want to hear from you. Comment below. Have you ever confused Odinani with Omenani? What did this video teach you? What do you now see more clearly than before? Let this be a conversation, not just a monologue. Your voice matters. Your perspective adds to the collective healing. If this resonated with you, then do something powerful. Like this video, share it with someone who's seeking, and subscribe to Africosmos 1, where Africa's soul speaks. Because the journey doesn't end here. It's only just beginning.